Okay, you have your NFL defense tier ranking. So you have your elite defenses, your great defenses, average defense, a below average defense, and trash. So you got your first team, the Browns. They're an interesting case. Their defensive line to me is very good. They have Miles Garrett, and the other side is a bit of a mystery. Jadeveon Clowney's not resigning, and their cornerback led by Denzel Ward, but they really lack anybody behind him. Their linebacker core really needs some work. Their safeties are good. I think they still have John Johnson and Delpit, was it? The draft pick. To me, they do have star players, but they definitely need some depth. Hopefully, the draft can change it. But right now, I think it's average. Then you have the Green Bay Packers. Their defense last year was actually pretty good, especially down the road. And they re-signed. They have a really good cornerbacks. They have Douglas, Alexander, I believe, is still on the team, and some other person I forgot. And their safeties have Amos and one other person I don't remember are pretty good. Their defensive line, they have a stud in like Kenny, and their pass rush definitely needs some work, and their linebacker needs some work. But their secondary in general is great, and their defensive tackle is good. And last year I think their defense was great, and I don't think they lost too much. I keep them great. And then you got the Ravens. They definitely could be elite. They have two great cornerbacks in Humphrey and Peters, and their safeties are pretty good. Their defensive line, what they signed somebody, was it Campbell? I think they re-signed him, and they definitely. I think that they're healthy. They can potentially be elite. Right now, I put them in great. Then you got the Rams. Their defense, they have Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd. They have two best defensive players in Donald and Donald and Ramsey, and they also have good depth. I think they're one of the elite defenses. Then you got the Dolphins. Their defense is pretty good as well. They didn't really upgrade them in free agency. They still have Howard, Emmanuel Ogba. Their linebacker corps is a bit weak, and their safety, they have a pretty good safety tandem. Their pass rush, hopefully, if Jalen Phillips develops, then pass rush could be pretty good. And their defense, it has like one hole. And I wouldn't put in a elite, but for now, I put in great defense. Then you got the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they're one of the teams that actually defense got worse. They still have Frank Clark and Chris Jones, but other than that, nobody really on their defensive line. Linebacker, they have Gay and Willie Gay, and they released Hitchens and Sorensen, and they signed Justin Reed, but they really let go Matthew, and their cornerbacks are really weak right now. Various Ward signed away, and I think their defense is below average. And you got the Steelers. They have T.J. Watt. They have T.J. Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick. Other than that, their defense isn't actually that good on paper. Their cornerback kind of disappointing, and last year I think their defense was ranked in like the 20s, so not great last year. And still they can improve, but for me right now, I put them in average. They got the Tennessee Titans. I believe their defense was actually underrated last year, and they pretty much had the same pieces. They re-signed Harold Landry, and everybody pretty much they had the good safety in Byred. I think that's his name, and their defense overall pretty good. They didn't lose many, but they didn't really improve. I put them in great for now. Right, the Chargers, I think they made the most improvement. They signed um they signed J.C. Jackson. They got Khalil Mack. They still have Joey Bosa. They have Derwin James at safety, and then the other corner was that I don't remember the old Broncos corner that signed with them. The defense looking great right now. They made like huge. They got Khalil Mack. They got J.C. Jackson. They have lots of star players, and their depth is not terrible. I expect a lot of improvement because last year their defense was not good. This year, I think they can be great. Then you got the New Orleans Saints. Last year, their defense was really, really good. Last year, I probably would have considered them elite, their defense. But this year, they lost a couple of players. They lost their safety, and their defense is starting to age. But I still think it's great. Then you got the football team, probably the most disappointing defense last year. Or now the Commanders, actually. Their defense was so disappointing. Chase Young could not follow it up. Their defensive line could be great. They have Sweat, Allen, and a couple other guys, but The cornerbacks aren't great, linebackers aren't great, their safeties are decent, and they just really disappointed last year. I put them in average. Then you got the Seattle Seahawks. They re-signed their safety. Other than that, they released Bobby Wagner. They don't really have anybody. I put them in trash. Then you have the Indianapolis Colts. They traded away their cornerback and they signed Stephon Gilmore. They got a Ngakwe, a much needed pass rusher. They have Darius Leonard, and their safeties, I'm not sure who they are, but doesn't seem to be a problem. Defense was pretty good last year. I put them in great. San Francisco 49ers. As long as they stay healthy, they have Nick Bosa and the cornerbacks. They signed Ward and a couple other guys. They have Fred Warner and another person linebackers. And overall, they're pretty good defense, and they address their biggest weakness on defense, which would be the cornerback. So I say they're great. Then you got the Raiders, potentially good. They got a cornerback, and they signed was it Jones, Chandler Jones. Linebacker, I still think they're good, bit weak, and safeties, if they develop, they have Morag, a rookie, or was a rookie. Hopefully, they can live up. For now, I put them in average. Then you got the Cardinals. Last year, the defense was not terrible, but this year they lost Chandler Jones, and they really didn't sign anybody. For now, I'm put them in average. Then you got the Broncos. They actually this offseason, I think they actually got more subtraction with that trade, losing Shelby Harrison, but they did sign Randy Gregory, and they still have Patrick Surtain. Last year, I think they were great. This year, I'm not sure. They still have what Justin Simmons, so I put them in great for now. But defense, I think they need a bit of depth. And then you got the Patriots. Last year, their defense was also great, but this year, definitely a bit of a decline. They lost a couple of linebackers. McCourty is getting old. They lost J.C. Jackson. That was the biggest subtraction for them. And their pass rush last year was okay, and they didn't really improve it this year. So for now, put them in average. Then you got the Buffalo Bills. They got last year they were like the number one or number two rated defense. This year they added Von Miller. They did lose. I think they lost Milano, the linebacker, but other than that, they have the best safety, Employer, and the other Micah. And then they have cornerback. You have Tre'Davious White. They're an elite defense. Then you have the Vikings. They have Hunter Kendricks at linebacker. They have Peterson, which is washed up at this point, and the cornerbacks are really a mystery. And they have Harrison Smith. They have a few good play pieces, but the rest are pretty much depth player. So I put them in average. Then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, let's see. They defense was good this last year, but they definitely lost some pieces, like their safety, their cornerback, their linebacker corps is white, and they lost. Was it? Did they lose Vita Vea? No, he re-signed with the team, but they definitely lost some pieces in the offseason. But I still think they're a great defense. Then you have the Dallas Cowboys. Last year they were great. Last year they were almost elite. They have Micah Parsons. They lost Randy Gregory, but they re-signed DeMarcus Lawrence. Cornerback, they have Diggs, and they did sign Malik Hooker if he can stay healthy. I will not put them in elite just yet, since other than the turnovers, they do give up quite a bit of yards, but for now, put them in great. Then you got the Chicago Bears. They're probably the biggest losers at defense. They lost Khalil Mack. They lost Hicks, and they did not improve whatsoever. On defense, I put them below average. Then you got the Falcons. They did not improve, and they lost their middle linebacker, the leading tackler, trash, and they were pretty trash last year as well. Then you have the Panthers. Their defense actually was not bad last year. They were like number 2, 3 in passing. And they did lose Gilmore, but they had Johnson, the other cornerback, and they have Brian Burns, and they're very, very young. So I put them in, and they did well last year, and they did lose Reddick, but not many, but I put them in great still. And the Giants, they're pretty much their whole team is trash, but their defense actually does have some pieces along the defensive line. Put them in below average. Then you have the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals defense, actually, I think they were responsible for the playoff run, and they're pretty good last year. The cornerbacks, pretty good at Hilton, and Apple wasn't terrible, though he did sell. And the linebacker of Logan Wilson, Jason Bates is definitely a top 3 safety. And Hendrickson, great, and that elevated the pass rush, put them in great. The Jets, they definitely made some moves, signed a defensive tackle, and but they still have lots of holes in their defense below average. Detroit, they're banking on the draft. Didn't make many. I don't think they made any defensive move. And last year they were below average, pretty close to trash. Then you got the Jaguars. They tried to improve. Last year they were definitely trash, but they did sign a linebacker and a couple other guys, put them in below average. Then you got the Houston Texans. They did not improve. The defense last year was almost the worst, and this year they just signed a bunch of backup second-tier free agents, so they're trash. Then you got finally Philadelphia Eagles. Last year they were pretty average, and this year they definitely addressed their biggest weakness being linebacker, signing Reddick and White. I still have some, and they still have a good defensive line with Barnett, but I still feel like and they do have Darius Slate at cornerback. Safeties are a bit of a. Didn't they sign Marcus Peters or that same safety? But for now, I still put them in average. They have an NFL defensive tier list.